Welcome back to the channel, and today I wanted to discuss a handful of ways for you to make your recruiting more realistic and enjoyable for your next dynasty. Each year I see countless comments and posts on social media about how players find the recruiting to be non-realistic or outright broken. While cheesing the CPU can be fun for a while, most of us get bored with a save when we dominate for too many straight seasons, and these house rules will help that a ton. So I created this list to give you some ideas of how to build that extra layer of realism into your runs. If you have any suggestions of things you do in your dynasties, be sure to leave a comment below so others in the community can use them as well. I appreciate y'all being here, and I hope you all enjoy. The first thing I always do when setting up house rules for my dynasty is to limit the amount of ways I can cheese the CPU, and with recruiting, I like to limit myself with how many types of players I can add to my board and when I can add them. I usually limit myself to players to 2 stars above my team prestige unless the player is in my pipeline or they have me as a high interest on their team list. Following this rule, I make sure I don't add any 5 stars or 4 stars to my board that haven't had any recruiting in the first couple weeks of the year. I do this by not adding anyone after week 3, but this can become difficult, so if you need to add someone due to a new stricter deal breaker that they implemented this season, I just go with the 3 star and below player to fill that position. The second thing I like to do is more of a recent addition to my recruiting house rule set, and that is to limit myself on how many total stars my recruiting class can be based on team prestige. For years, I have limited myself to a certain amount of stars above my prestige level, but that was slightly unrealistic since lower teams may sign higher stars once in a blue moon or in the portal. So to combat this, I looked at the most recent recruiting classes of the last 3 seasons and for all 136 teams and compiled a list of the ranges of teams usually signing each year. For example, the 2 star programs sign about 50 to 55 total stars per class, so this means I can sign any amount of players to that total of 55. I only count 3 star players and above since real life ratings only go as low as a 3 star in the recruiting process. So if I sign 10 4 stars, that means I can only sign 5 more 3 stars, and the rest of my class has to be 2 stars and below. Or I can go heavy on 3 stars and get up to 18 or 17 with one 4 star player and have better depth next season. I like this version most as it builds in a give and take within recruiting that really plays well out during the season. My third recruiting house rule is to limit the amount I can scout each player each season. I usually set this up in a simple manner with 2 clicks on scouting. With no boost from your coaches, this works out to about 40% of scouting, but later in the dynasty, when you have more resources and better coaches, it will naturally progress higher, which resembles real life recruiting. There are other ways to build things in, like giving yourself a certain amount of players you can fully scout each year, or basing the amount of scouting you can do on how close the prospect is to your school, or even what level you have the recruiting tree at for that position, with a tier list like 40% for no upgrades and 60 for one upgrade in that category, and so on. But before we get to the last 2 here, be sure to leave a like below or hit that subscribe button if you're new here. Before you go, if you are enjoying the video today or may use these in your next dynasty. Also, be sure to check out the channel for other College Football 26 content from our Texas State Rebuild Series to full Dynasty Link conference realignment guides, building in some fake histories for some more immersion in your dynasties. But anyways, let's get back to it. One of the last things in the recruiting cycle is the recruiting visits, and with most recruits signing about halfway through the season and some players never having more than one team recruiting them, it may seem redundant to schedule visits. But I will intentionally schedule as many recruits to visit as I can, since it is incredibly rare for a top recruit to commit to a school that they have never gone to a visit on. This also makes you manage your points more closely each week, as you will need some left over to schedule those visits, and it also encourages smaller schools to stay as local as possible when recruiting those recruits, since those visits are immensely cheaper than the cross-country ones. And lastly, for our most realistic recruiting house rules, I like to install a slider set for recruiting. I personally recommend any player to do this, as it makes the game more enjoyable, authentic, and slightly harder, but in a realistic way. But I more specifically recommend you add these slider changes to the transfer portal settings. Changing the portal size to 20, which should be the standard rate, along with reducing your transfer rate to 38 and the CPUs to 48, will give you a more authentic experience in the portal. A ton of players will still move each year, but you won't have the same broken moves like Arch Manning going to Georgia after winning a national title. It lowers the aggressiveness of players on the brink of transferring and makes things a lot more well-rounded each and every season. And with that, those are the 5 best house rules and some alternatives that you can build into your dynasty each year to make recruiting more authentic for your run. Let me know in the comments what you all think is the most useful or what ones you all use yourself. I appreciate y'all tuning in. I hope you enjoyed. And as always, I'll catch you all in the next one. And a huge shout out to Chris, our very first premium channel member. Thanks for all your support, man. It's really appreciated.